Hello, everyone, and welcome to The No Show. I'll be your host, Nathan Orenstein, and today I'm going to be ranking the Best Picture nominees from this year's Oscars. We have a pretty solid set of nominees this year. In alphabetical order, they are All Quiet on the Western Front, Avatar, The Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, Elvis, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, The Fabelmans, Tar, Top Gun Maverick, Triangle of Sadness, and Women Talking. If you've seen my top 10 movies of 2022 video, you'll recognize that half of these movies are in that list as well. So I'm going to keep my discussion of those films a bit briefer and refer you to that video instead. There might be some rearranging of the order in that top 5 though. And I will say that I would give positive reviews of varying degrees to all 10 of these movies. So just because one's ranked near the bottom doesn't mean it's not worth watching. And of course, this is just my opinion. With all that introduction out of the way, let's get right into things. Kicking things off at number 10 is going to be Elvis. Look, I like Elvis, but this movie is undeniably all over the place thanks to the always chaotic and maximalist direction from Baz Luhrmann. He's a man that goes for massive style points in his movies, and Elvis is certainly no different. It does work a lot of the time here for sure, especially considering the subject matter is the king of rock and roll. But it can also come off as childish in spots, and it's really an issue when it becomes a case of style over substance. I think the pacing is ultimately what suffers the most from this approach, as perhaps the more mellow and understated elements of Elvis's life gets rushed through in order to get to the next big spectacle. And sometimes too much time is spent on individual spectacles, resulting in a real stop-and-go pace that started to really wear on me by the end of this 159-minute epic. All that aside, though, the real heart of this movie is the transformative performance we get from Austin Butler as Elvis Presley. He is absolutely fantastic throughout the entirety of this movie, and I'm pulling for him to win Best Actor in an admittedly very stacked lineup. Let's just all try to forget about Tom Hanks' performance in Elvis, though, shall we? Overall, Elvis is a greatly entertaining musical biopic that's bolstered by a fantastic performance from Austin Butler. However, it's unable to fully hold the weight of Baz Luhrmann's lofty vision. Next up at number 9 is All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a German remake of the 1930 film of the same name to win the third Best Picture Oscar ever. My thoughts on All Quiet on the Western Front are pretty simple. If you enjoy war movies, you'll probably love this. If not, I don't think this movie will be the one to change your mind. I mostly fall into the latter camp, unfortunately, but I'll give All Quiet the credit it deserves too. This thing is nothing short of a technical marvel. Its production design and cinematography combine to depict fully realized trenches and war-torn battlefields that rival really any other war movie. The sound design and sound effects are crisp and pack realistic punches at every turn, and the makeup work for mud and wounds look phenomenal too. Lastly, the performances are all great too, really selling the misery of war. The problem for me, and really a problem with a lot of war movies in my opinion, is that there just isn't anything here we haven't seen before. Sure, the portrayal of young men going off to war expecting glory and instead getting some of humanity's greatest horrors is a compelling enough setup. But, for me at least, it really doesn't go beyond that at all, and it failed to fully grip me. The best war movies are the ones that present some sort of differentiating factor, and I just didn't get that with All Quiet on the Western Front. Again, if you like these kinds of movies, you will probably be all over this. But if not, it's still probably worth watching for the technical perfection on display here, but not a whole lot more. At number 8, we have Avatar: The Way of Water. The basic plot of The Way of Water is that the Na'vi people of Pandora are under attack by humans, and our main characters must flee the forest of the first film. They end up with a coastal tribe of other Na'vi, where they must learn to fit in and prepare for when the humans inevitably catch up with them. My experience with this film was split into two very distinct sections, the parts before the water and the parts with the water. Pre-water, or when they're escaping the jungle, just completely failed to grab me. It wasn't bad by any means, but I just found it completely uninteresting. Once we get to the water though, hoo boy, the original Avatar was a landmark in visual effects and CGI, and James Cameron and co. truly raised the bar even higher with The Way of Water. The underwater scenes are breathtaking, and Cameron has really created a whole other world on the planet of Pandora. The Na'vi look great too as usual, and it never feels like you're watching something that was generated by a computer. It's not all visuals though. The family dynamics and the relationships between these two different races of Na'vi are really interesting, and they lend themselves to some genuinely powerful emotional moments. And it all culminates in an hour-long fight scene that just leaves your jaw on the floor. I wish the first act of The Way of Water was able to hold my attention, but the last couple of hours really do make up for it. Of all the movies on this list, this is the one that truly demands to be seen in a theater, so go see it if you haven't. Next up at number 7 is Women Talking. Taking place only about 15 years ago, Women Talking follows the women of a small, isolated religious community who are constantly being attacked by the men who have literally all the power in this community. The women come together to decide if they will do nothing, stay and fight, or leave. And that's the movie. It's basically a 100-minute long conversation between about 15 or so women, of varying ages and backgrounds. At first glance, it's probably the least appealing movie among the nominees, and I get that, but I'm here to tell you to give it a chance. I know I described it as an 100-minute long conversation, but it is a damn good one. This is quite possibly the best screenplay of the nominees, presenting so many different viewpoints on an issue that might seem cut and dry at first. Each character brings their own perspective to this conversation, and it makes for a truly fascinating watch. It helps that the ensemble cast is fantastic, and it's a shame that not a single person from it was nominated for the acting categories. What keeps this one lower in the rankings comes down to my personal taste regarding the presentation of it all. I won't get into the nitty-gritty, but I just wasn't a huge fan of the overall approach with the direction here, aside from the direction with the performances. That doesn't take away from how powerful this film is, though, and I really encourage everyone to experience it for themselves. Coming in at number 6 is The Fabelmans, which is a semi-autobiographical film about Steven Spielberg's childhood and upbringing. I went into this expecting a movie about how he fell in love with movie making, and while it is definitely about that, it is so much more. Most notably, it's about his parents, their imperfections, and how living with them ultimately shaped his perspectives as a person and as a filmmaker. It's incredibly fun and full of wonder when it needs to be, but also serious and contemplative at times too. There are some soul-destroying moments here that I just wasn't really expecting in a movie like this, but they're pulled off incredibly well and in a way that doesn't mire the film in grief or sadness. And of course, everything is presented in the most carefully crafted way from Steven Spielberg's masterful direction. My biggest complaint is honestly that I wanted more, and I feel like he maybe could have gone a little deeper in some of the story arcs here. But overall, The Fabelmans is another huge win from Spielberg, and it feels really special and meaningful to get a look into the upbringing of one of the greatest to ever do it. Like I said, the top 5 nominees here all appear in my top 10 movies of 2022 video, so I'm going to keep my discussions here a bit briefer. If you are curious about learning more about these movies and you haven't seen that video yet, go check it out. At number 5 is Triangle of Sadness. Triangle of Sadness is class commentary presented in the most hilarious way possible. It follows a bunch of rich people on a luxury cruise and how the power dynamic gets flipped on its head when the passengers and the crew get marooned on an island. It doesn't necessarily have anything groundbreaking to offer in the commentary department, but it keeps things interesting throughout and always manages to challenge the dynamics that are constantly being shaped over the course of the film. It's also one of the funniest films of the past year, mixing high and lowbrow comedy in a way that you just don't really see very often. Triangle of Sadness is a breath of fresh air, and I'm really glad it snuck in with a nomination. Moving down a bit in my rankings at number 4 is going to be The Banshees of Inisherin. I wouldn't say my opinion of this one fell at all, just that the movies that passed it grew on me a bit. Either way, The Banshees of Inisherin is fantastic. It's literally about two friends, and what happens when one just decides they don't want to be friends with the other anymore. It's the other comedy nominated this year, and it's even funnier than Triangle of Sadness in my opinion. But this is a black comedy if there ever was one, and this thing gets pretty dark and serious at times. The writing is so smart, and it's delivered by the single best cast of the year, and it's not particularly close in my opinion. It's a simple and even ridiculous movie about simple people, but Martin McDonagh elevates it to incredible heights with his direction and writing. I hate having to move it down in the list, but the top 4 are all on another level in my opinion, so make sure you catch them all. Kicking off the top 3 is going to be Tar. Put simply, Tar is one of the best character studies I've ever seen. It follows fictional classical conductor/composer Lydia Tarr, played by Cate Blanchett, who is widely considered to be one of the greatest living conductors and composers, and the greatest female one at that. Cate Blanchett gives the best performance of the year, and I don't think anyone really gave her much competition. And Todd Field delivers some of the tightest writing of the year too. It is a dense, cold, and meticulous film, but it is one of the most rewarding experiences I had at the movies all year too. Discovering who Lydia Tarr really is consistently interesting and never as simple as other character studies are. I was on the edge of my seat the entire film, which is saying a lot for a film that relies heavily on dialogue and that's set in the world of classical music composition. For what it's worth, I've thought about Tar nearly every day since I saw it months ago in 2022. It sticks with you, and while it's not a film I can easily recommend due to its demanding nature, it is easily one of the best of the year. At number 2 is Top Gun Maverick, and I really am not going to waste your time with this one. If you haven't seen it by now, you probably just don't want to. I've personally seen it 3 times, and I honestly have loved it just as much every single time. Top Gun Maverick is easily the biggest crowd pleaser of the past year, but it's also just incredibly well made. Everything about it is pretty much flawless. And don't get me started on that final act, good lord. As opposed to Tar, I couldn't recommend this one more if I tried. But, like I said, if you haven't seen it by now, it's probably by choice. Your loss. And finally, taking the top spot is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Everything Everywhere is a triumph in every sense of the word. It is perhaps the most ridiculous movie to ever be nominated for Best Picture, and it is 100% the favorite to win, too. It combines the insanity and excitement of an action sci-fi blockbuster with the grounded reality of a family drama, and it's perfection. It shouldn't work as well as it does, but Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert have crafted a true masterpiece here. The love gained and love lost among this family is felt so strongly through the entire runtime, and that's of course mixed in with scenes of people with hot dogs for fingers or a guy eating a whole stick of chapstick. Its ability to stay so grounded through all this nonsense is of course the selling point here, but the way this presentation is also represented in its themes of nihilism and existentialism is so genius too. While I did love this on my first watch, it was in my top 10 of the year after all. It was really on the second watch where everything fully clicked for me, and I can recognize this for the masterpiece that it is. Please check this one out if you haven't, and I'm excited for it to take home a ton of hardware at the Oscars on Sunday. Well, that's going to do it for the list. I hope you enjoyed my ranking of this year's Best Picture nominees, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down below about any or all of these movies. And of course, feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. I've been Nathan Orenstein with The No Show. Thanks for watching.